So this is the first ever sutta that the Buddha gave. It's the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dhamma. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana. There the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus of the group of 5 thus: Bhikkhus, these 2 sides should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What 2? The pursuit of sensual happiness and sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Without veering towards either of these sides, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives rise to wisdom, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. And what bhikkhus is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, and which leads to Nibbana? It is this noble eightfold path that is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right recollection, right composure. This bhikkhus is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, to knowledge, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. So, what is the difference between the middle way that the Buddha discovered and asceticism and indulgence? Because back in the day, some people accused the Buddha of both. They would accuse him of being an ascetic, of being a denialist, and some others would accuse him of being indulgent. So, what is it that really distinguishes the middle way from those 2 sides?
Seeing body as not self. Seeing body as not self. Like indulging in sensual pleasures obviously takes body has body as a central reference point, and the self-mortification as well. So seeing that body is not self seems to me is one part of discerning the middle way.
Well, yeah, but that would be kind of farther down the development. Like, let's say somebody is starting out and the Buddha tells them, so, okay, how do you know, the classic formula about somebody hearing the Dhamma, it says they go forth and then they take on these precepts, which is basically the 8 precepts, including celibacy, sense restraint, moderation in eating, so seclusion. So many people would say that those things are a form of asceticism, like not eating in the afternoon, not delighting in company, living away from others. They would say that is an extreme path of asceticism. And then other people who kind of go further into, who are proper ascetics, they would say, well, the fact that you eat in the morning, you eat only once, but you eat anything, kind of, you eat like delicious food sometimes, and or they would say, well, when it's cold you use heating, and when it's hot you use fans or air conditioner. Therefore you're not, like ascetics would accuse people who are practicing the middle way from being indulgent. So like, why is none of those criticisms valid? Like, why is the middle way genuinely above those 2? What is it that distinguishes them? without like, just from a beginner's point of view, not necessarily like later on, because it's saying there like the Noble Eightfold Path, like knowing the body as not self and all that stuff, that would kind of you don't start with that, let's put it that way.
I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, to some degree you could let's put it like a beginner's point, like you might recognize to some degree the unsatisfactory nature of indulging in pleasures, or I guess for someone who has practiced like more strict asceticism, they might be able to recognize that that's not, yes, doesn't bring satisfaction. It doesn't how to put it? Kind of feeds itself, so to say. Yeah. So the more you do it, the more you need to do it. Kind of become dependent on it, on that practice, whatever it is, for your peace, so to say. Whether it's indulging in sensual pleasures or indulging in like self-mortification.
Right, so you're saying like indulgence in self-mortification, well, it's also a form of indulgence, basically.
Yeah.
So like, but how do you know whether, because externally it might look very similar, especially to someone who isn't kind of who doesn't have experience with the practice themselves. One person who is practicing indulgence in self-mortification, and the person who is just practicing renunciation, which you could say is the middle way. Like, what would be the distinguishing aspect that they can know for themselves, not necessarily by what others are kind of judging?
Well, the kind of state of mind or the intention behind doing it.
So what would be the intention behind someone who's practicing self-mortification? Like, how is it...
Well, yeah, essentially it's rooted in how you feel, basically. So trying to change the feeling in such a way that pleases you, basically. Whether it's pleasant or painful.
Wanting to get rid of things is an attitude that is behind the self-mortification, and wanting to get things is an attitude behind sensuality. And they both miss the point.
And in fact, the attitude behind, like, self-mortification, you're getting rid of things because you also want to get something.
Yeah.
But not in the same coarse level as sensual pleasures, but you still want to get kind of whatever your idea of what enlightenment is.
Yeah.
You're chasing after it through this practice.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, one very strong sign of somebody who's practicing self-mortification is that if they are if they're suddenly not able to do those practices that they're holding on to as a means of supposedly freeing themselves from suffering, they will suffer. So like those practices, they, even if they don't depend on the world anymore, like they don't depend on coarse sights, sounds, smells, taste, touches, their emotional dependence is on this practice now.
Yeah.
So like if they don't do it, they would suffer pretty much the same as somebody who is dependent on sense objects.
Yeah.
So it's just that generally it is harder to be forced to give up those practices than it is to lose sensual pleasures. So like you would suffer more on average if you are engaged with sensuality than if you're practicing like a good level of self-mortification. You would actually suffer. Your pleasure is more impermanent if it depends on sensual pleasures. But when it comes down to it, both of them are absolutely not ideal, because both of them are dependent on things that are not in your control.
Yeah.
So there's that sutta that talks about the it's called the bait, and it talks about 4 types of deer herd.
Yeah.
And there's the first one who kind of just carelessly goes into the bait, gets trapped by the hunter, and then the hunter does with them whatever he wants. Then there's the other one who kind of sees that the others are falling into demise on account of this, and so they decide to completely shun the bait. They go into the mountains, and for a while they're free from the trap. But eventually there is no way that they can stay there forever, so something will have to happen. Something will have to prohibit their continual engagement in that practice, so they have to come back to where the bait was before. And then, because they didn't learn how to maneuver around the bait, all they know is the same old habit of biting into it again, and so they get caught. The third one is kind of a subtler problem that gets caught in views. We can discuss that later. And then only the fourth deer herd knows how to stay where the trap is, where the hunter, in the range where the hunter is setting his traps, but they have learned how to not bite them. So that is like, in a person who is practicing the middle way, the difference is that they have recognized that the baits are not optional. Like experiencing pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches is not actually optional. Whereas a person who is practicing self-mortification is kind of having this continuous, perpetual quest, never-ending quest to prevent themselves from experiencing agreeable things. And that's impossible, because when you do that long enough, your avoidance of agreeable things becomes agreeable. So that's why it's like, if you can never succeed in it without a contradiction. And the final point of that is like, you get to where the Buddha actually went just before he kind of turned around and realized that was the wrong path. It's like, I have to stop breathing so as to truly not be dependent on any kind of pleasure, because anything less than that, if your perception of indulgence is just the pleasure existing, then the only true way to kind of fulfill that ideal is to go to that extreme, like, okay, I won't even breathe now, because even that is causing a form of pleasure. So that's why self-mortification in the end is futile, but it still has to, like, one has to give things up. So it's not that one just, I stay where I am and I just abstractly think about the middle way, and that's how I'm partaking the Buddha's instruction. There are factually things that you have to give up, like I said before, if you're not keeping the precepts, you have to take them on. You have to, if you're not practicing sense restraint, you have to take it on. So, like, how would a person go about changing their behavior, which nowadays is going to start from the default point of indulgence?
Yes.
So how do they kind of go about taking on a closer version of the middle way? Because another thing to note is that the middle way is not a matter of choice. Like, often it's thought that the middle way is just about choosing kind of a intermediate. Let's say I don't know, I have a choice between eating very delicious food and then very disagreeable food that tastes like paper or something, and I kind of choose something in between, and then that's the middle way. So, like the middle, as the sutta I just read says, the middle way is the Noble Eightfold Path. And it starts with the right view, meaning understanding the Four Noble Truths. So the middle way can only be practiced because the middle way is the Fourth Noble Truth, by the way. So it's like only by knowing that truth, that this is the middle way, is the person would be able to follow it. So, but how does a person kind of set themselves up through the things that they can do, like the virtue and sense restraint, so that they do it more in the direction of the middle way than asceticism or self-mortification? Why would they have to? What would they? As I said, since externally it can look the same, what is it that internally they would have to do so as to not fall into that trap?
Well, they need to know how to attend to things rightly. And based on that right attention, they will be able to discern whether they are acting out of wholesome or unwholesome. And then that distinction might still be somewhat blurred. It will only be properly clear once the view is right, but that's also not going to happen miraculously. That is sort of, one needs to work on that, but how one is attending to things, which is the Yoniso Manasikara, that is going to be the factor there that needs to be worked on in order for the Noble Eightfold Path to become actual in one's experience.
Yeah. So, there is actually one sutta that talks about how the acquisition of Yoniso Manasikara is like the omen or the portent for the arising of the Noble Eightfold Path. So once a person has understood Yoniso Manasikara, that is basically the condition. And there's another one that says Yoniso Manasikara and the utterance of another, meaning somebody who has understood the Dhamma, are the two conditions for the arising of the right view. Yeah. Meaning the two conditions for the arising of the Noble Eightfold Path. So, yes, that's true. It's Yoniso Manasikara, but how would you practice that concretely? Because, like, for example, you might be like the actual middle way. As I was saying before, it's not something that you can just fix down as a code.
No.
That because sometimes today, doing one thing will be rooted in indulgence. Tomorrow, doing the same thing might be rooted in self-mortification, based on something that a person has to learn how to discern so as to start working on the middle way. So,
what is that thing?
Yeah,
that is one's intentions behind one's actions. Like, why am I doing this now? Am I doing this because I want to avoid experiencing something else, or because I want to chase something which I think I'm lacking right now, which is already based on regarding things wrongly. This whole notion of something being missing right here and now, and to chase it. So then again, externally, behavior might look the same, but people might be doing it for completely different, let's say, reasons or intentions, and so that would be the factor. And an intention, by the way, is not publicly observable. One's behavior is what is publicly observable. That is what a scientist can study, put a camera there, look at it from the outside. But why someone is doing what they're doing, that can at best be inferred, and it is impossible to abandon doubt from the outside. That can only be done when one takes up this first person present tense perspective. There's a sort of privileged point of view where you see yourself doing what you are doing while you are doing it, including your reasons for doing it.
Yeah. So basically, if you might be choosing to not eat one day, and based on the intention behind that action, that could be either renunciation, meaning the good sort of practice,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be self-mortification.
Yeah.
So if you're, so if there is an intention, regardless of what you tell yourself, you might, be 100% sure that this practice according to Buddhism but if the intention behind the action is affected with some type of desire, some type of craving, no matter how externally renunciate the action is, it's leaning towards self-mortification. So that's why actually those two extremes, they're not like, they are different only superficially.
Mm-hmm.
In the depth of it, they're exactly the same. They are craving for something that you don't have right now.
Yeah.
Craving for something outside of this experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if the person, let's say, chooses not to eat, and that's because they have this ideal of this enlightenment that's going to come to them, that's kind of like, okay, eventually I'm going to stop experiencing these feelings that I get when I fast. Eventually all this stuff, all this displeasure that I experience right now is going to disappear as a result of me just doing this practice. And so, yeah, exactly, like you would see if that person, if something happens, they can't fast anymore, some sort of circumstance happens, they would be annoyed internally, because they're already kind of setting their bets on this, and it's going to be unpleasant if it doesn't go the way they want.
Yeah.
So it's still within like the First Noble Truth, getting what not getting what you want, and getting what you don't want.
Yeah.
It's still revolving around the same principle.
Mm-hmm.
So then, but if the person is, let's say, the intention behind their action is not some kind of desire for some experience, or it's not like it's not this external search for something else. It's more like you recognize that this practice gives rise to let's say certain mental states.
Knowledge, vision, as it is.
Gives rise to wrong mental states. Like, let's say when you recognize yourself that when you fast,
yes.
you have, the mind is revolving around it. It has complaints. Like it starts disturbing you, and it really puts you off your mood and that sort of stuff. Then if you take that on as a form of learning how not to crave against unpleasant feeling, if that is the intention behind your action, then that asceticism externally, what looks like asceticism, could be beneficial. But even then, it's not about just what you state as your intention. It's not as about what you would say if somebody asks you, what is your intention behind this? Because that answer doesn't change. That answer is going to be the same all along. But internally, your intention could switch back to desire at any point. So,
and you might not be aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's knowing that intention has to be seen as something internal, not as something that you just set once and that's it. Like the intention doesn't depend on you. What intention is there right now? The intention is like basically the state of mind, and the state of mind changes. So that's what you have to be aware of. So if one day you find yourself, I took the practice of fasting, whatever. I took it initially as a genuine interest to learn how not to resist unpleasant feeling. And there was no kind of external desire of wanting this whatever subtle pleasure you might be looking for, that wasn't there. But then you see yourself, but the fasting itself doesn't hurt anymore. The mind is not really resisting it. Now what the mind is resisting is not getting this result out of the fasting,
Mm-hmm.
not getting this enlightenment or special insight or whatever out of the fasting, then now that the displeasure now moved. The displeasure is you will feel it if you stop fasting.
Yeah.
Because now you became attached to this.
Mm-hmm.
So then you would have to see, oh, so the intention has changed.
Yeah.
And then you would have to adjust accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there is no mechanical guideline that I just stick to this and then you're gonna be liberated. Even the most accurate instructions that you might get from the Buddha himself, you might be applying them for the right reasons for a time, and then the expectation sets in, the craving sets in, and now you're going in the same direction of craving under the name of Dhamma.
Yeah.
So it's like there is nothing. There are things that are always wrong, which is breaking the precepts, but there is nothing that is always right. Because the intention can always be, the intention behind the practice can always be corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And ignored, not seen.
And the right practice is the intention behind being right. Like the right practice is when the intention behind what you're doing is right. And that cannot be breaking the precepts. Everything else, if the intention is right, can be the right practice. So,
so how is somebody who is coming to the practice recognizing that the middle way is something one needs to acquire, right? Having said all of this now, how is somebody going to go about it if they see the danger in breaking precepts, as we've just said, and there's the sense restraint which we can put on top of that. Seclusion, very beneficial. Suppose somebody has no argument or quarrel with that. They try to set that up to the best of their ability. Then what? Is that it? Like what's next? And assuming that somebody is, taking advantage of the fact that the discourses have been translated in all sorts of languages, take that on as a mirror to learn about themselves, basically. That material is there. Then what needs to happen next if one's going to have a chance to gain the Noble Eightfold Path and then practice the middle way?
Well, I think practically it's like you might think, oh, I'm restrained rightly, I'm keeping the precepts rightly, but I think it's very likely that you would do exactly what you're just describing now. So you will take on the precepts, you will take on the sense restraint, you will do this and that and the other, failing to realize that your intention, well, maybe sometimes recognizing it, but not fully, not always, not to the sufficient degree that would, set this basis up in the right way.
Yeah.
So if you were to, I think if you were to do what you just described, like keeping the precepts, sense restraint, seclusion, always with the right intention, there's nothing else you need to do.
Exactly.
So the thing that you need to constantly revise and revisit is, okay, I should be doing these things. Why? Why am I doing it right now? Like, not why it should be done, but why am I engaging in this right now and not in that, or why am I abstaining from the other?
Yeah. So basically you hear what you have to do based on the external instruction, but more important than just following the external instruction is to constantly keep questioning what you're doing, because the mistake or the failure to have a middle way is exactly what you said. It's not even like you haven't understood exactly what practice I need to do. It's more like when you do the practices that both Puthujjana and Arahant would be doing, which is virtue, sense restraint, and all that, the wrong intentions sneak back in, and you're kind of very likely to not notice it. So that is the most acute thing, like recognizing that you don't have the middle way because you're not clear about the intentions behind your actions. So for as long as you keep that in mind, you will stop putting the emphasis on what practice I do and what practice I don't do, because that's very clear already. Like if you're self-honest, the suttas are very clear what practices, sort of quote, should be done. So you would just you would just put your effort in always being watchful of the intention behind that practice, because that's what's going to determine it as being right or wrong. So then the middle way would become established, like the understanding of the Four Noble Truths would be when you can't have the wrong intention without realizing it. When you can't kind of accidentally slip into the wrong reasons for doing the practice, the wrong reason for keeping the precepts, the wrong reason for being restrained. You can't be accidentally having a wrong intention anymore. That's when the middle way is actually established. So what makes the ordinary person not have the middle way is just that failure to see their own intentions while they're there. That's why it's the other another way of describing what has to be seen in order to get the right view is what's called in the suttas the sign of the mind. That basically saying, like, mind is the word mind, chitta, is etymologically connected to intention. So it's like a person who can't see their intentions reliably is a person who won't be able to know what's wholesome as wholesome and unwholesome as unwholesome, meaning they won't be able to know what is according to the middle way and what isn't. So but then is it that you are immediately able to see the full extent of your intentions from the start, or is it like should you be from the very start really trying to perfect your discernment of your intentions to the maximum degree so that you can just do the practice? Or,
well, I mean, you can try, but that's practically not how it's going to be.
Yeah.
So when it starts with precepts, which means that you're introducing some boundary to your behavior, this is where you're going to see your intentions. The intention might still be there to go in a certain direction, and then you bump into that precept. So you are sort of, in that sense, a little bit divided against yourself, so to speak, but that is precisely showing you the problem. Yeah. And so that can be further refined, which allows less room for intentions to be there without being seen rightly.
Yeah.
And then, with the sense restraint, it's the same thing. And also seclusion is going to reveal, like when one is always surrounded by other people, it's very difficult to see that you might be doing all sorts of things just, because I want to be understood, I want to be recognized, I want to be admired, I don't want to be rejected, right? So
those are this type of intention behind actions.
Yeah, but exactly, and you are not going to see any of that if you're always in that same environment. Yeah. Go and sit for a week on your own without having anyone else around or someone telling you what to do, and you can become very insecure because suddenly it's like, oh, there's no one here actually acknowledging that I exist even. So now what am I going to do? And that shows a whole side of the mind which is in normal quote-unquote circumstances very difficult to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually says that without seeing the sign of the mind, one can't get the right view, and then the sign of the mind cannot be seen if one is delighting in company.
Mm.
So that's actually a very good example. Like, because when we say intentions behind actions, it's not like, oh, I am doing this because tomorrow I have to go to work, and sweeping the house today is necessary because I can't do it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what it means to say intention behind actions.
No.
Intention behind action is on the level of your attitude towards the feeling.
Mm.
So you could say there are, if you want to boil it down to the simplest way, there are 3 intentions behind actions only. One of them is, you could say, welcoming, trying to get more pleasure. The other one is trying to get less pain. And the other one is trying to distract yourself when there is neither pleasure nor pain.
Yeah.
So, like what you said, when you're alone, you're not experiencing pleasure, you're not experiencing pain, but there will still come this impulse to kind of, for the mind to get involved with something, because that kind of absence of something obvious to be preoccupied with, that becomes unpleasant.
Yeah.
So then, those are the kind of intention behind actions that one needs to be looking for. So there should be no necessity for like a more super detailed label of what the intention is, except those 3. That's like, you don't need to complicate it more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the point I was getting to before was that, so it's not about thinking that, okay, I'm going to figure it out once and that's it. I can see the intentions behind my actions now. There's multiple layers to it. So there's multiple layers to the middle way as well. Like, initially you will be, for example, somebody who doesn't keep the 5 precepts at all. Let's take the most extreme case. If they take on the 5 precepts, just taking on the 5 precepts is going to be a form of them seeing their intentions more than they were doing before. Like just getting used to always keeping the 5 precepts, they will have to, by necessity, have become more aware of their intentions on a very basic level. That's not really enough for practice, but kind of enough to just not be like an animal.
Yeah.
But they will have to become, and that's exactly why not keeping the 5 precepts is so bad, because it's like completely just whatever intention is there, you just go with it. So that's why it's so bad. But keeping the 5 precepts at least will force you that, okay, certain intentions behind your actions you will not be able to engage with anymore. So when you see those intentions, you won't do them.
Yeah.
So then that's one level. Then the next level, let's say you could say the person takes on celibacy. Now that will require a little bit more, well, quite a bit more recognition of the intention behind their actions to be able to practically do it. Because you can refrain from sexual activity, but your mind is going to have those intentions there because it's used to go in that direction.
Yeah.
And then if you don't recognize them, you will find yourself sooner or later about to engage in sexual activity. So it will force you to recognize the intentions behind your actions as well. And it's just it's that progression. So from the beginning all the way to the end, it's just a refinement of a person being able to see the intentions behind their actions more clearly. In fact, with the hindrances, when it comes to abandoning the hindrances, usually it's taken as it's about focusing on objects and not experiencing other objects anymore. But when the suttas explain what samadhi is, it's always about purifying the mind from unwholesome things, in the same way that you are purifying your behavior from unwholesome things, from unwholesome intentions. So that's why, in fact, there is no way for a person to get samadhi that is in accordance with the middle way if they haven't developed their body and speech in accordance with the middle way beforehand. Because it's actually a much subtler version of or more subtle instance of the same principle of purifying unwholesome intentions. So the same would then the same thing that you did. Okay, I recognize this intention to do this or that with my body. I choose not to engage with it. Well, you will start to see the same thing with your mind. I see a hindrance of sensuality. I see a hindrance of ill will, and obviously the saying no to it is much coarser. It's done on a much more subtler level, but it would be the same as you choosing not to kill when there is an intention to kill, for example. So even that is also just about intention behind their actions. There is nothing in the Dhamma that is about something else. Like, okay, I watch my intention behind the actions, and then now when it comes to samadhi, now it's time to do something different. So, because that's usually the perception. And then there is no connection then between your sila and your samadhi. It's kind of like just two different things. So, and then once you start seeing your intentions behind your actions, you recognize you are able, once you see them to a certain extent, let's say, which is a sign of the mind, the prerequisite for the right view, then you can see, oh, these intentions are suffering. These intentions are the origin of suffering. So the cessation of these intentions is the cessation of suffering. So you will get to understand the Four Noble Truths once you are to a very, very high degree able to see the intentions behind your actions. So that's like you are fully established in that principle of the middle way to the point where now you can't forget it anymore.